This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another great video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Wife had an affair with my cousin's husband before we were married. And you're going to find this is a very interesting story. And what I'd like you to do is let me know if you feel the same way at the beginning of the story as you do at the end of the story. Like I said, it's very interesting and has a lot of twists and turns, so let's get into it. And he starts out and he says, I'd like some advice on a marital problem I'm currently dealing with. I've been married to my wife for 6 years and we have 2 children, ages 3 and 5. She has been a great wife up to this point and we've enjoyed a very happy marriage. However, over the weekend, I learned something that has put everything in doubt. I got a phone call just before noon on Sunday from one of my cousins. She was really upset and proceeded to tell me that earlier that morning her brother-in-law called and told her my wife and her husband had an affair years ago. He claimed the affair took place while they were engaged and continued for 1 year or more after they were married. For context, they got married over 8 years ago, about 4 months before I met my wife. I asked my cousin why her brother-in-law didn't bring this up before. She explained that he and her husband had a terrible fight over a card game the night before. He told her he was sick of keeping his brother's dirty secrets and felt she had a right to know. I asked if she was sure he didn't make up the story out of anger. She said she thought that too, but when confronted, her husband admitted to the affair, but swore he ended it before they got married. He did, however, acknowledge the affair took place for several months while they were engaged. He also told her that my wife didn't know he was engaged at the time. However, this contradicts what her brother-in-law said. According to the brother-in-law, my wife knew he was engaged and continued the affair even after they were married. The brother-in-law also stated that his brother told him he was still having sex with my wife during the first year we were dating and didn't stop until I proposed to her. Oh boy, hearing that, that had to be tough. Hearing those words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt something snap in my brain. I'm not making that up. I thought I was having a stroke. My mind was racing 1,000 miles an hour, and my heart was racing even faster. I can just imagine. I mean, think about this guy. He's been with his wife for years. He's got 2 kids. He's thinking everything is perfect. And then to get this information out of the blue, wow, I mean, that would be devastating. While I was talking to my cousin, my wife swung by and asked who I was talking to. I told her it was my cousin, and she asked me not to hang up as she wanted to tell her something. They had become friends over the years and kept in touch through social media and sometimes by phone, but there would be no discussions between them on that day. After hanging up, I felt like the life had been sucked out of me. It's amazing how stress can so quickly destroy your mind. I took a few minutes to gather myself and figure out what I was going to say before I confronted my wife. When I finally walked into the kitchen to face her, she asked why I didn't let her talk to my cousin. I told her she was busy and had to go, but I needed to talk to her about something important in the living room. I led her over to the sofa with her asking me what we needed to talk about. After we were seated, I didn't beat around the bush and asked her directly if she ever had an affair with my cousin's husband. As soon as she heard this, her eyes grew as big as saucers and started to fill with tears as she struggled for words. I'm paraphrasing now what she said, but it went something like, yes, no, yes I did, but it's not what you think. I told her to tell me everything from the beginning and to not leave anything out. She was crying but began speaking with confidence and without hesitation. She told me they met at the dentist's office in the summer of 2014. She said they casually chatted while waiting for their appointments and he asked for her number. She said at the time she wasn't dating anyone and was very lonely as she had just moved to a new town to start her first job out of college. So she gave it to him. So she gave him her number, is what he's saying. She claims he told her he was dating, but not seeing anyone seriously at the time. She said their first few dates were strictly platonic and didn't become romantic until after the fourth or fifth date, even though he was very persistent. Well, he wasn't that persistent if he waited for 4 or 5 dates. According to her, all of their encounters after that consisted of going out to eat, then going back to her place and having intimacy. She claimed they went out only 9 or 10 times in total during that summer, as he always claimed to be busy. Yeah, he was probably busy with his fiancée. She said she didn't love him, but was lonely and desperate for affection at the time, and again reiterated she had no idea he was engaged. Women do not like to be alone. That's one of the key takeaways from this story. I asked her when the affair ended, and she said their final encounter occurred during Labor Day week of that year. So that was back in 2014. That day is important because my cousin and her husband got married on Saturday, August 23rd, and went on their honeymoon right after, not returning until Labor Day morning. So this Chad, just comes back off his honeymoon with his wife and then goes out and meets his girlfriend a few days later to get some. Unbelievable. My wife claimed that after that encounter, he ghosted her and blocked her phone number. When she called the company where he claimed to work, they said he'd never worked there. She said after that, she searched extensively online and eventually discovered a possible address for him. She went to the location and was greeted by his brother. He asked who she was, and she told him. She said he looked at her strangely and told her his brother just got married and no longer lived there. She said when he told her that, she was horrified and didn't know what to say, so she just ran off crying. As she left, she said he shouted out to her to stay away from him, you crazy bitch. She realized she had been used and felt so foolish and guilty for being so gullible. She said she thought long and hard about tracking down his wife and telling her, but decided just to forget the whole thing and put it behind her. Well, that was a mistake this girl made, because if this happened the way she's describing it, then she should have called the wife and let her know. That all went down in September of 2014, several months before she and I met after church one Sunday. We immediately clicked, and the rest, as they say, is history. We were married a year and a half later and had our first child 10 months after that. Until now, I would have trusted her with my life, but now I'm not so sure. I feel like our entire relationship has been tainted by this. She swears on our children's lives that she is telling the truth, but how can I believe her after this? She said the reason she didn't tell me is she thought I wouldn't believe her and would break up with her. She also didn't want to destroy my cousin's marriage, as my cousin was pregnant when I introduced them, which didn't occur until Thanksgiving Day in 2015. My wife said when she saw my cousin's husband, she nearly passed out. I remember that day well, as she was very quiet and didn't eat much, and we ended up leaving early. I chalked it up to nerves, but now I understand why she acted the way she did. We didn't see them again until our wedding day 8 months later. Since then, we've seen them maybe once or twice a year at family gatherings, with the last time being at my uncle's funeral last month. I want to believe my wife, I really do, but her story contradicts with what my cousin's brother-in-law told her, even though her husband's story is more in line with what she told me. My wife swears what the brother-in-law is claiming isn't true and is willing to take a lie detector test. As you can imagine, she is very upset by the whole thing, and so am I. What are your thoughts on this? Should I trust my wife, or do I take the word of a low-life miscreant who's at war with his brother? If her story is true, I think I can get past it and move forward. But if the brother-in-law's story turns out to be true, I will end the marriage. My cousin is already headed down that path. And that's the end of his original post. And now we're going to take a look at some of the comments he got back. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button. And also leave a comment. That will help get this video seen by people all over the world. Now, let's take a look at some of those comments. The first one is from a woman. She says, trust your wife and not those miscreants, as you called them. She has been with you for 7 years and has given you 2 beautiful children. You said yourself your marriage has been perfect. How could you risk it all over something you don't even know to be true? Now, this woman makes a few good points here. The next response is from a guy. He says, my take is that she has been cheating on you with your cousin's husband since the day you started dating. Why would she keep that a secret otherwise? I would definitely have her take a lie detector test, and while you're at it, I'd get both kids' DNA tested. I'd be willing to bet that at least one of them isn't yours. So this guy is taking a very hardline approach, and he makes a few good points here. The next response is from a woman. She says, keeping something like that from you is a significant breach of trust. Yes, it is. That being said, from what you explained, I can see why she did it. I'm not saying what she did was right, but if I was in her shoes, I likely would have done the same. You can move past this and rebuild the trust you once had. I hope things work out for you. And the final response is from a guy. He says, I'm a shoot first, ask questions later type of person. I generally don't trust anyone and never give second chances. However, in this case, I would. I recommend you talk to both the brother-in-law and your cousin's husband to get their stories firsthand, then make your decision. Unless you have definitive proof she cheated on you, I'd give her another chance and try to move forward. And that's a sampling of some of the comments he got back from the community. And now the OP comes back with a couple of updates. The first one occurred 3 days later. He says, thank you for all the responses you've left to my post. As you can imagine, my personal life is a real shit show now, with everyone in my family blaming my wife for being a homewrecker. Reading your responses has given me some peace of mind as I figure out what to do next. There have been a couple common questions that keep coming up that I wanted to address with this post. The first one is why I call my cousin's brother-in-law a miscreant. Both brothers are miscreants actually. The reason I say that is they are both in their 30s but still act like frat boys. They both have problems with alcohol and gambling, and neither one of them can hold a job for more than 6 months. That being said, I've always gotten along with both of them, although I don't see them that often, especially the brother-in-law. We've gone out golfing a few times, and I've hung out with my cousin's husband and the other men in the family at various family events over the years, but we're not friends. The next thing I want to clear up is that I'm 99.99% sure my wife has not cheated on me with him or with anyone else during our marriage. As I stated previously, she has been an ideal partner, and we've been inseparable since we met. If we're not together, we talk and text constantly. That being said, I think I'm going to take my wife up on her offer to take the lie detector test, and I'm also going to get my kids' DNA tested as many of you suggested here. Thanks again for your support and take care. And that's the end of his first update, and now he comes back with the final update. And the final update occurred 5 months later, actually over 5 months later. He says, I've come back to let you know where things are in my life before I delete this account. Let me start by stating right up front that my wife and I are still married and are doing just fine. After my last update, I did several things that gave me a high degree of confidence she was being truthful. So let's see what he did. He says, that same day, I decided to call my cousin's husband and get his side of the story. He basically told me the same thing that my wife did. However, he swears that he ended the relationship with her before he got married. If you recall, my wife said their last meeting occurred a few days after he came back from his honeymoon. I believe my wife here, as he's been making the claim to everyone that he'd been faithful throughout their marriage, but acknowledges he cheated while they were engaged. I asked him if that was true, why did he tell his brother he was nailing my wife right up to the day we were engaged? He said he didn't remember telling his brother that, and if he did, it was just stupid locker room talk between guys. He swore to me it never happened, and assured me that he has never had a private conversation with my wife since he ghosted her. He's in a world of hurt right now, as my cousin has always been the primary breadwinner in their family, and she kicked him out right after he confessed. He's back working now selling cars, but is struggling to make ends meet and is really upset of being away from his child. When we talked, he asked if I could put in a good word for him with his wife. I told him I wouldn't do that, explaining that she needed to make that decision on her own. I advised him the best thing he could do was to demonstrate to her that he had changed by giving up the drinking and gambling and getting a job. He has since done all those things and really cleaned up his life. However, my cousin is still moving forward with a divorce. After speaking to him that day, I called his brother to get his story. He told me all he was doing was relaying information his brother had told him. He said he never saw his brother and my wife together, and the only time he ever saw her before we were married was when she came to his door searching for his brother. He said as far as his brother telling him he was nailing my now wife right up to the point we got engaged, he said he probably was lying about that too because he lies about everything and is a complete loser. Like I said, my conversations with these two bozos happened 5 months ago, right after I found out, and I've not talked to either one of them since. From what I've been told, they are still at war with each other, and it's unlikely they will ever mend fences. As for my wife, I let her read this post and all the responses I received. After doing that, she insisted on taking a lie detector test and having our kids' DNA tested. I told her that wasn't necessary, but she insisted, stating she wanted to do that for me to give me complete surety about everything. She took the lie detector test and passed without any issues, and the DNA test showed both kids were mine. I'm also happy to report that after learning the truth about everything, my family no longer sees her as a villain, and they are all back on good terms with her. While I'm not happy that she kept a secret like that from me, I've forgiven her based on the circumstances, though I still struggle a little with trusting her like I once did. And let me just tell this guy something right here. You're never going to trust her the same again. This was a significant breach of trust. Even if she didn't cheat on him, she kept this dark secret from him for years. In any case, that's where we are now. I know some guys on here are going to be very disappointed with this outcome, but I feel very confident in my decision and I'm very happy with my life. Thank you and God bless. And that's the end of his story. And overall, I think this guy handled this situation appropriately. However, like I just said, he's never going to get back to that level of trust he had for his wife, and he's always going to look at her as being tainted because she was with this guy who he obviously believes is a miscreant. He called him a bozo. He sounds like a Chad. He sounds like a complete loser. This was a very tricky situation, and you had to get all the facts before you rushed to judgment. But I think in this situation, he made the right decision. And now I want to take a look at what I think are the morals of this story. The first one, a lie of omission is just as bad as an outright lie. And in fact, in some cases, it's worse. In this situation, she kept this dark secret for years until it was uncovered. And look what happens once it's uncovered. Things explode. Next, women do not like being alone and single. Remember that, guys. It's very unusual for a woman, especially if she's attractive, to be single and alone for too long. They've got to latch on to someone, even someone they may not like, because they don't want to be alone. And she mentioned that. She met him in the dentist's office. She really didn't like him, but she was alone. She was in this new town, didn't know anybody, so she just started going out with him, and then one thing led to another. Next, most dirty little secrets eventually get exposed. If you're serious about a man, ladies, it's best to disclose your past right up front, because eventually he's going to find out, and when he does, the outcome is going to be worse than if you told him right up front. Yes, there's a chance you could lose him depending on how bad your past was, but it's always best to be forthcoming. Next, Chads generally tend to be losers in life, like this guy. He's a drinker, he's a gambler, he can't keep a job, but he's good with the ladies. He was good with the ladies, let's put it that way. And if you look at some of the Chads you've known, you'll probably put most of them into this bucket. There were probably some that went on and became successful at something, but a lot of them fall into this category. Next, gather all the facts before making a life-changing decision. And that goes without saying, but a lot of us are more like that one respondent said. We're more shoot first, ask questions later type of people, being more aggressive when it comes to things like this, and also being doubting. But you can see in this particular situation, that was really important to do. And finally, once trust is broken, it's very hard to get back. And I think that's what this guy is going to discover here. And I'd be very curious to hear from this guy a year, 2, 5 years down the road of how his marriage is going. It'd be very interesting to see if everything is as good as it was before or if it's different. It's good, but it's different. And I believe that it's probably going to be the latter. So those are my thoughts, and now I'd like to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and would you have handled it like this guy did, or would you have done something completely different? Would you have taken a much more aggressive approach in this situation and not forgiven her and potentially even ended the marriage? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And I will talk to you